For the rest of this unit, we will be building skills in data analysis. And when we get to actually studying theories in the next set of 5 units, units 2 through 6, you will have the skills in place. So in this unit, we're building skills. And I want to start by talking about how we measure crime. There are 3 major sources of crime data. The first one is official statistics. Official statistics. These are statistics that are produced by law enforcement agencies. So typically they're produced by local law enforcement agencies, your local police department, who then sends their crime statistics to the FBI, and then they're aggregated at the federal level. We'll talk about that in more detail in a few minutes. The second major source of crime data is victimization surveys. We conduct a survey, we ask, have you been the victim of a crime lately? And then if you say yes, we ask you what sort of questions about what sort of experience you had, what kind of crime you were victimized by, what kind of perpetrator it was, and so forth. And we'll get more into detail on that in a few minutes. The third major source of crime data is self-reported data. These are also usually from surveys where we ask you, have you committed any crimes recently? And if you say yes, we ask you about the details. Now, you might think that most people will not report on a survey that they've committed a crime. Well, it depends. We'll talk about the details of that. So these are the 3 major sources. Now let's get into the weeds and look at the strengths and weaknesses of each of these sources. First of all, we'll start with the UCR, the Uniform Crime Report. The UCR is a collection of official crime statistics. So this is category 1, official crime statistics, crimes that have been reported to law enforcement. And then your local police department reports them to the FBI, and they're aggregated. These are the crime rate numbers that are cited by government officials and news media. I've specified several weaknesses in your notes. Different jurisdictions define crimes differently. A crime that might be defined as a misdemeanor in one state could be considered a felony in another state. Things that are legal in one state might be illegal in another state, and so forth. So you have to take care about comparing these numbers across states, because we might be talking about apples and oranges. 2, the UCR does not record all types of crime. First of all, UCR only records crimes that people report to the police. So any crime that is not reported is not going to show up in the UCR. Second, the UCR only records what the FBI calls index crimes. Basically, those are index crimes are the crimes that they record, and index crimes do not include all kinds of crimes. And I give you a list of crimes that are not recorded: drug offenses, many federal crimes, many types of white-collar and corporate crime, environmental crimes. These do not show up in the official crime statistics, simply because the FBI does not consider them index crimes. They're not worthy of being included in the uniform crime report. So that's often a political question. We won't get into that, but it is a weakness of this particular data source. It does not include all kinds of crimes. Not all law enforcement agencies participate is another weakness. Most of them do, but not everybody reports up. The UCR only contains reported crimes. I mentioned that. That means UCR underestimates the amount of crime, because we're only counting the reported crimes. Sometimes police departments falsify their crime reports for political reasons. Well, do they reduce the number of crimes, or do they increase the number of crimes when they falsify their crime report? It could go either way. It depends on their political motivation. So if I'm a police chief and I want to get more funding for my department, I might say that there is more crime than there really is. On the other hand, if I'm the police chief and I'm getting pressure from city council to reduce the crime rate, I might put pressure on my officers to underreport the crime rate. So the word falsify is a strong word to use. Sometimes you might have an event where several crimes are committed, and the officers might only decide to record the lesser offense because the chief wants to keep the numbers down. That's not exactly falsifying, but it's not complete and truthful reporting either. So there are a lot of ways for police departments to manipulate these statistics. Now, I'm not indicting all police departments for lying about the crime rate. I'm just saying these are some of the things that can happen, occasionally do happen, and that make the official statistics a little bit less reliable than we would like. The second major category of crime statistics is crime victimization surveys. The gold standard here is the National Crime Victimization Survey, NCVS, and I'm going to show you how to use this later in this unit. So this is a survey that's done periodically, conducted by the federal government, surveying Americans aged 12 years or older. And if you're selected to respond to this survey, you will be asked about your victimization experiences. Have you been the victim of a crime? What was your experience? The strength of this is that it includes crimes that were not reported to the police. You may have decided that it wasn't worth your time to call the cops, but if somebody is on the phone to you and asks you if you were a victim, you will report it. So this, in that sense, this data source is preferable to the Uniform Crime Report if you want to get a sense of all crimes that were committed. The Uniform Crime Report does not contain all crimes. This gives us a stronger estimate of all crimes. Probably more accurate than UCR data in the sense that we don't have political pressures on what gets counted and how it gets counted. Weaknesses. The victimless crimes are not counted. Drug dealing, prostitution, gambling. If there's no victim, there's nothing to report. So that's not going to be included in this survey. Second weakness. Murder victims obviously cannot participate in a survey because they're dead. However, most murders do show up in the UCR, so that's not a huge problem, but it's something to keep in mind. Third weakness, there's no legal or evidentiary standard by which to assess the accuracy of the data. Basically, the survey takers believe whatever you tell them. You could be completely nuts, or you might have some kind of agenda. You might report things falsely. We have no way of accounting for that in this survey. And the final weakness, lack of memory. You might have forgotten. Somebody stole a bucket out of my front yard 3 months ago and I get called for the survey. I'm not likely to remember that. It's such a trivial thing. I didn't report it to the police. It's just a bucket. I might not even remember it when they call me. Even if it's a crime that I do remember being victimized by, it could be as many as 6 months after the event that the survey takers call me, and my memory might have changed or deteriorated in those 6 months. The third major data source are self-reported crime surveys. These are surveys in which we ask people about crimes that they may have committed. So if you're asked to participate, I will call you on the phone or interview you and ask you to tell me about crimes that you have committed. Strengths, they are more accurate than you might think. A well-conducted survey can produce good data, and this data, when we can get it, can be very useful. Samples might not be representative of the larger population. I'll talk about some of the weaknesses of that in a few minutes. People who admit to committing crimes in surveys are usually admitting to fairly low-level offenses. Most people are not admitting to committing murders or rapes in these self-reported surveys, but rather only admitting to lower level. The worst offenders with the most serious offenses are the ones least likely to be forthcoming. Honesty of self-reports varies by demographic variables. Men are less honest than women. Blacks are less honest than other races when reporting crimes that they may have committed on these surveys. You might be wondering, how do we know? Well, if we can, the times when we can cross-check these self-reported surveys against other data, such as police records, we can measure whether or not the respondent was telling the truth or not. And that's how we know that certain demographic categories are less forthcoming than the other demographic categories. The last section here, which crime data source is best? It really depends on the research question you're trying to answer. If you're studying the most serious crimes, murders and rapes, the UCR is usually the best. It's the only source for murders, obviously. For the less serious crimes, we prefer to use the other. Okay, this is a table that will help us compare the usefulness of the various types of crime data. So the top graph has crimes reported to the police, in other words, the UCR data. Second graph has victimization survey data, in other words, the NCVS, National Crime Victimization Survey. Third chart has self-reported data, where we ask you if you've committed any crimes. Let's look at the top one first, and then we'll compare all three of them. On the x-axis, we have how often a crime happens, how prevalent it is. On the y-axis, we have how serious a crime it is. So low seriousness crimes happen the most often, or the most of them. High serious crimes, they don't happen very often, so they're low on the y-axis. So somebody steals a bucket from my front yard, probably happens a lot, high on the y-axis. Somebody murders me, it doesn't happen very often, low on the y-axis. The dark shading shows the proportion of crimes that are not reported. The light shading, this section here, shows the proportion of crimes that are reported. So you can see with low seriousness crimes, the majority of them are not reported to the police. All this dark shading up here, crimes not reported to the police. So seriousness of the crime is low, not reported to the police. So, and then you can see up here, as the seriousness of the crime as the crime gets more and more serious, a higher and higher percentage, a higher and higher proportion of these serious crimes reported to the police. The black proportion of non-reported crimes is very small here. So what this tells us is that if we are studying low seriousness crimes, official crime report data is probably not going to be very useful. If I want to know what percentage, how often buckets are stolen off front yards, the UCR is not going to tell me that. It's just not very good for these low seriousness crimes. It is very good for high seriousness crimes because most of those are reported to the police. The second chart here is for victimization survey data. It's set up in the same way. So you can see with low seriousness crimes, a far higher percentage of them are reported to the police compared to up here, this top table. Very few low seriousness crimes are reported to the police. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Low seriousness crimes are much more likely to be reported on victimization surveys. A big light shaded area here. Small light shaded area here, not likely to be reported to the police, low seriousness. So if I'm studying low seriousness crimes, which data source should I use? Crimes reported to the police or victimization survey? Clearly, victimization survey is superior for studying low seriousness crimes. Those crimes are more likely to show up in the victimization data than they are in the official police reports. The same thing with self-reported data. You can see once again, nearly all of the people who are reporting having committed a crime are reporting low seriousness crimes. So to sum this up, if I'm studying low seriousness crimes, I want to look at self-reported data or victimization survey data, not official police reports. If I'm studying high seriousness crimes, police reports are going to be fine. Victimization survey will be fine so long as I'm not looking at rapes or murders, because those are the high seriousness crimes least likely to be reported. If I'm studying, if I want to look at self-reported crimes, I'm pretty much stuck with low serious. High seriousness crimes are very rarely reported on self-reported data. Okay, so now it's time to start building some data analysis skills and to jump into actually looking at some of these data sources and see how they work. So let's have some fun with that.